a defender of our Constitution. Probably we've not had a more ardent supporter and idealist than Nathan Dahm. Nathan Dahm, in his 12 years in the state senate representing District 3, he was an ardent supporter of pro-life positions, but also Second Amendment. But I do know that he takes the Constitution very serious, and he appreciates it. His background, his family were missionaries in Romania. I'm pretty sure Nathan is fluent in Romanian, but he can speak it. And he served over there as a young man. He was a director of a Bible school over there for several years, a dean. He was active in the Tea Party back in the day in Tulsa County. He's a good man. And today he's our state Republican chairman. And he was elected in 2023. And Nathan is going to come and he's going to tell you, I think he's going to tell you a little bit about how government works. He knows our theme, engagement, government engagement. And he has a lot of wisdom. Some of you may have seen him on national television on an interview or something. But could we give a hand to former Senator Nathan Dahm?
Well, good morning, everyone. Always great to be with city elders. I know in the past it was more difficult for me because session usually does happen on Thursday mornings. But as a former senator now, I don't have to be there at the state capitol as often. I still am down there in a new role, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But yes, I served for 12 years in the Oklahoma State Senate, so I know the legislative process. And with that, I also understand the federal process and other things. But I want to hit on two main things before I kind of talk about the actual process of how the legislative process works. The two things I want to hit on is, first of all, one of the things that I have experienced at the national level, the state level, the federal level, is a problem with elected officials not understanding their role and their responsibility. A lot of elected officials, because they are officials, because they have a title, whether that's senator, representative, mayor, counselor, whatever it might be, because they have a title, they feel entitled. They believe that their job is to make everything better for everyone else. The problem with that is that they are not omnipotent, right? They are not God. They don't know everything, even though they think they do, even though people are always calling them senator, representative, even though their egos are always being inflated, they don't actually know everything, right? They do not know how best for you to live your life. As much as they think they do, you all know what's going on in your lives, with your family, with your finances, all those things better than they do, and so you should be responsible for that. Most of them don't see it that way, though. They see it as, hey, I was elected to lead. I was elected to lead you all in the best way possible. You all know how to run your businesses better than they know how to run your business. You know the inner workings of it. But because they have this title, they think that it's their job to come up with these solutions. Unfortunately, they obviously haven't studied history, because if you've studied history, you know that government always is trying to fix the problems that government generally created in the first place, right? And on the rare instance that government didn't create the problem, because we do deal with this thing called sin, right? We are in a fallen world, right? There is death and disease. There are these things that happen. There are what are called natural disasters, right? I know insurance companies call them acts of God, but they are not acts of God. Maybe the God of this world, maybe of Satan, right? So we have to deal with some of those things. Yes, government isn't out there necessarily, creating hurricanes or some of those things, right? But a lot of the other problems that happen are because government created those problems. And so we have to first acknowledge and realize that yes, there are bad things that happen in this world. Outside of heaven, we live in a very imperfect world. Once we get to heaven, everything will be perfect and great. But this side of heaven, there's going to be some bad things. But what people in government often think is, well, this bad thing happened, so let's go ahead and do X, Y, Z, without realizing that X, Y, Z is not going to fix what happened in the past. You can't solve that, right? And most likely, it won't even stop it from happening in the future. As much as it pulls on the emotional heartstrings, and as much as we have love for our neighbors, government is not the solution for almost any problem out there, okay? So first, we have to have people in elected office that could understand that. So part of our job is to educate and inform them and teach them on that. The best way to do that is to tell them what their job is. The role and purpose of government is to secure our rights. That's what our founding document, the Declaration of Independence, says. Okay? If you go back to the Declaration of Independence, it talks about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? We all know that. As bad and as failing as our public schools often are right now, at least most students know life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. They've at least heard that, right? Maybe even in a movie or something, but most everybody has heard that or knows that, right? We're endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights, among which are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We're not given those rights by government. We are given those rights by God. Those are God-given rights. And so the Declaration of Independence says that phrase. But what we often forget is the very next phrase. After it says life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Anybody know what it says next? It says that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. Why does government exist? To secure these rights. And again, it says among these rights are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It's not just those three. Those are the main ones, because if you don't have your life, right, you don't have liberty. And if you don't have liberty, you can't pursue happiness. Don't believe me, go to a communist country where they don't have liberty, right? They're not happy. I grew up in a formerly communist country. I can tell you, they were not happy. They did not have liberty. And many of them lost their lives by government killing them because they spoke out against the government. So when you have a communist government, it does the exact opposite of the purpose of government. Government's job is to secure the rights of the people. But so many in elected office don't see it that way. They've never heard it to know that. So we have to help educate them on that and say, hey, your job as my representative or my senator or my congressman or my mayor is to secure my rights. Your job is not to try to create jobs. That's our job as business owners and the general public. We create the jobs. Your job is to protect our rights so it's easier for us to create jobs, not more difficult. Your job is to protect our rights and do everything you can to make sure that our rights are not being infringed upon. But so many people don't truly understand that. So that's part of our job, is that we have to educate them and let them know that as an elected official, your job is to protect our rights. And yes, that includes the right to life as mentioned in the Declaration. And as you mentioned, I worked on that especially for the lives of the unborn. That means Second Amendment rights. That means free speech rights. That means Fourth Amendment rights. It means all those things. And so that was my primary focus when I was at the state capitol in Oklahoma City, is focusing on protecting and defending those rights. So that's one thing, is that we have people that are entitled and they don't understand their role and responsibility. But then another issue that we have is that people don't know within that scope of whose responsibility certain things are, right? So as an elected official, their job, their role is to protect our rights. But then we have these different layers of government, right? We have the federal government in Washington, D.C., where we have a president whose job is the commander-in-chief of the military. That's one of the roles and jobs of the president. We have a House and a Senate. The role of the House is to start all bills dealing with revenue. The role of the Senate is to deal with treaties and passing legislation and other things, but they each have different distinct roles. We have a court system, and we can get off on that. How many of you are aware of the activist judges that are happening right now because they don't understand their role and responsibility? But we've been fed this false lie that we have these three co-equal branches of government. How many of you learned that in school or heard that recently? Three co-equal branches of government. That is a flat-out lie. The Constitution does not create three co-equal branches of government. Don't believe me? Go read the Constitution. Go look at Article 1 and how long it is, and Article 2 and how short it is, and Article 3 being the shortest provision in the Constitution dealing with the judiciary. The Constitution doesn't even say that we're supposed to have 9 Supreme Court judges. It says we shall have a Supreme Court. It says we shall have a Chief Justice. Do you know why we have 9 Supreme Court judges? Because Congress passed a law saying we're going to have 9. You're hearing about all these district judges and everyone out here doing these nationwide injunctions on President Trump. Do you know why we have district courts? Because Congress created district courts. The Constitution says we shall have a Supreme Court and such inferior courts as Congress shall from time to time ordain and establish. Congress created our court system. Congress could uncreate them. Congress could limit all of these activist judges. And there's some bills out there right now that they're tinkering with that idea a little bit. They're working towards that. The Supreme Court or any of these judges, how do they get their position? They're not elected to it, right? They're appointed by the president. They're confirmed by the Senate. Are the courts superior to the president, to Congress? No. They were supposed to be the weakest branch of government. But we have let this lie permeate out there that just because they're a lawyer, no offense to any lawyers out in the room. I'll tell my lawyer, you've all probably heard this lawyer joke. You know what you call 1,000 lawyers at the bottom of the ocean? Good start. Yeah, see, I knew somebody would have heard it. So I'm not a lawyer, so don't. I've been accused of being a lawyer. I'm not a lawyer. No offense to any lawyers that are out here, but we've bought this lie that lawyers, for some reason, that they put on a black robe and all of a sudden they are entitled, right? That they can issue judgments, that they can issue, these create the law of the land. How many times have you heard that with the Supreme Court? Well, the Supreme Court made their decision, so that's the law of the land. You know what it says at the top of every law of the land that the Supreme Court issues? It says it is the opinion of the Supreme Court. Roe v. Wade was an opinion of the Supreme Court. Yeah, I go through every single one of them. It's the opinion of the court. And so we've gotten out of balance because people don't understand roles and responsibilities. They don't understand the role of the presidency. They don't understand the role of Congress. We can get into Congress, how much they've deferred to the administrative state and bureaucrats and letting them do everything that is the job of Congress, the judiciary. But then it goes into other areas too, because we have Washington, D.C., but we also have the state level, right? And then we have counties, and then we have cities. Did you know that the federal government is supposed to be subservient to the states? Do you all realize that the federal government existed after the states because the states created the federal government? And the states gave them limited power and said, hey, here's the few things that we want you to do because we want these things to be consistent amongst all of us. We don't want Texas to have its own currency. Well, actually, I know Texas wasn't originally a state. Okay, we'll use some of the existing ones. Okay, we don't want Maryland to have their own currency and Massachusetts to have a different currency. Or we don't want, Pennsylvania to have its own weights and measures different from what Georgia has. There's certain things that need to be consistent. There's certain things that for us to operate as the United States, there's certain things we have to be united on. We have to have unity in our military, right? A general in South Carolina needs to equal a general in North Carolina, right? So that they can work together. But outside of that, it wasn't that everything was left to the states. Everything was reserved to the states. The states had all the power that they then gave some to the federal government and said, you all do this and nothing else. But it's been so perverted and inverted that now everybody looks to Washington, D.C. as the be-all, end-all. Now, Washington, D.C. passes a lot of laws that dictate how we have to do stuff at the state level. Unconstitutionally, they do that, but everybody at this point, or majority of people, just go along to get along. They don't know any different, so they do that. But we have to have a better, proper understanding of whose role and responsibility it is. Because when they start talking about stuff in Washington, D.C., we need to have people saying, that's not your job. That's not your role. That's not your responsibility. First and foremost, your job is to protect our rights. Secondly, beyond that, yeah, we gave certain powers to you, certain things that we said, hey, as the government, we do want you to do this stuff. We want you to do the military. We want you to do these other things. But when you start engaging in other things, like education, that's not your job, Washington, D.C. Eliminate the Department of Education. It's unconstitutional. It's not their job. Now, when it comes to the state level, in our state constitution, we have provisions about education. And so there are things that we can and have to do at the state level because of our Constitution that was created in 1907. However, truthfully, the responsibility of education is the parents. So again, people don't have a true understanding of the roles and responsibilities. It's not the federal government's job at all. Zero involvement in education from the feds. State level, shouldn't be, but our Constitution says that we have to, and there's certain things we should and have to do. So, okay. But in reality, the job of education is the parents. That's their job. But we don't have enough people that understand that because too many people look at it as essentially a babysitting service. So I'm going to send my kids off to school, public school, and so I get time to do whatever I want to do. People don't understand roles and responsibilities. When it comes to adoption, when it comes to orphanages, who used to be in charge and responsible for adoption and orphanages? The church. But then the government came in and said, we're going to get engaged. We're going to take this away from the church. Not the government's job. It's the church's job and responsibility. Hospitals. Anybody know the history on hospitals? During the time of the Crusades, there were people called hospitalers who would take care of those that were going on pilgrimages, journeys to the Holy Land. They would take care of the poor and the needy and the injured. The church created hospitals. And while there are still some religious hospitals, church hospitals, ran hospitals, the government is so involved in it that it's expensive and costly and all those other things that you have to deal with. It's not the government's job to be involved in those things. So we have to start educating people on what their job and role and responsibility is. And especially those elected officials who don't know that first and foremost, it's their job to protect our rights. At whatever level of government you're at. If you're a school board member, your job is to protect our rights. Okay? Like if you're the president, your job is to protect our rights. No matter what level you're in, your job is to protect our rights. But then beyond that, there are certain responsibilities that are assigned to you. And if it's not something that's in the Constitution at the federal level, you shouldn't be involved with it. If it's not something at the state level Constitution, and you're at the state level, you shouldn't be involved with it. And even if it is assigned as a responsibility, it would still be better that we return back to how it's supposed to be, that the parents be involved as much as possible. So that's the type of stuff that we need to educate them on. But how do we do that? So I also want to talk a little bit about the process. So here at the state level, our legislative session goes from February through May. It's in our state constitution. We start the first Monday in February. We end by the last Friday in May. Now we can end before that, but that's the deadline when we have to stop. So we have 4 months that the senators and representatives are down at the Capitol. It's usually Monday through Thursday, and it basically goes in 3 cycles, okay? Your first cycle, you have all the Senate bills that are being heard on the Senate side. At the same time, you have all the House bills being heard on the House side, okay? And within that first cycle, there's a process. The process is that the bill first has to get heard in a committee, If it's an education bill, it goes to an education committee. If it's a bill dealing with law enforcement, it goes to public safety. There's different committees for different entities, right? And so the bill has to go through the committee first. The chairman usually is the gatekeeper. They can say, I'm not hearing this bill. I hate this bill. I dislike this bill. I don't want this bill. And they can just be the stopgap on anything they want. I think that's the wrong process, but that's the process we currently work in. It's important that you know that because when the session starts, you might have to be contacting the chairman and say, hear this bill. We want this bill to be voted on. We want this bill to advance. So it's important you know the process. So first, the chairman has to agree to hear the bill. Then they schedule it. Usually within the first 3 to 4 weeks is when they're doing the committee votes, and the committees will get together and meet. All the members on that committee will vote, and if the majority vote yes, then it passes out of committee, and it's available to be heard on the floor. So Senate bills going through Senate committees, able to be heard on the Senate floor. House bills going through House committee, able to be heard on the House floor. So last week was the final week for both the House and the Senate to hear bills on the floor. And I ran the numbers. I have some statistics for you all. With that, with last week, the Senate passed 504 bills out of committee. So now there was 3,000 bills filed, okay? And it's important that we understand focusing on the state level because Washington, D.C. generally passes about up to 100 bills a year, okay? In the state legislature, they pass 400 a year. So as much as Washington, D.C. does have a major impact on us, people don't realize how much of an impact the state level can have as well, okay? And so 3,000 bills were filed this year. Senate passed 504 of them through committee. House passed 484 bills through committee. So almost 1,000 bills passed through committee, right? Of the House bills, of those 484, 439 were heard and passed the House floor. So 90% of the House bills passed. Of the 504 Senate bills, 320 passed the Senate, 64%. Now, I, yes, am of the opinion we don't need more laws on the books, okay? I understand that. And so you might at first blush just say, well, hey, that's great that the Senate is passing fewer bills. However, when you look at the numbers, you are more likely to get a bill heard and passed on the Senate floor as a liberal Democrat than you are as a conservative Republican. Even though Republicans have super majorities. There's 48 state senators in Oklahoma, 40 Republicans, and 8 Democrats. Wow. Those 8 Democrats had more bills heard than the most conservative members of the Oklahoma State Senate Republicans. Why? Because they don't like what the conservative Republicans are doing. Leadership. Yeah. The leadership that is elected by the entire body is generally there to try to stop conservative movement moving forward, conservative bills. And it takes time, turns. I mean, I served for 12 years. Sometimes the House was more conservative than the Senate and vice versa. Sometimes, it depended on who was in leadership. But you all, I'm sure, have heard of Senator David Bullard. I know City Elders was very supportive of him. He had, let me pull up the numbers real quick here. He had 12 bills pass committee and only 5 bills heard on the floor. Some of you have probably heard of Shane Jett. He's the chairman of the Oklahoma Freedom Caucus. I'll mention that here in a minute. But he had 9 bills passed committee, 1 bill heard on the floor. Whereas several Democrats got 4 bills heard, 3 bills heard. So this is a part of the problem, okay, is that they will hear bad bills. And I'll tell you some of the bills that Democrats got heard. This isn't necessarily a bad bill, but it's a stupid bill. They had a bill that said that you could forage for nuts and mushrooms on public land. Okay, I'm not opposed to that. I mean, it's kind of a freedom thing. Sure, it's public land, let people go and forage for that and everything. But you know what they didn't hear? A bill to lower the income tax. Why not let us keep more of our own money so we can go buy a bag of peanuts instead of having to forage for acorns? right? They passed a mandate bill on insurance, several insurance mandate bills, and there were several Republicans that ran these bills, but there was a Democrat that ran a bill that said that if an insurance provider provides contraceptives, they had to provide at least a 1-year supply. Well, again, it should be up to the provider to determine what they're going to do. Because by mandating that every single one has to offer a year's worth of supply, you're going to increase the cost for everyone. We don't need those mandates. But they heard that Democrat bill. I can give you other examples of nonsense that was heard, while at the same time, they wouldn't hear any pro-life bills on the Senate side. Now they passed one on the House side, a strong one on the House side. But my purpose in explaining this is that the system right now is rigged against conservative, godly measures, and it's supportive of the establishment, current system process of just maintaining the status quo. But we can change that. But in order to change that, we need people to engage. Okay? So let me talk a little bit about my current role and what I'm doing now. How many of you have heard of the Freedom Caucus in Washington, D.C., the House Freedom Caucus, all right? You've probably heard of Jim Jordan, seen some of his videos online. You've probably heard of Mark Meadows, who was President Trump's chief of staff last time. These were some of the founders of the Freedom Caucus. About a decade ago, they realized that, hey, we have a problem with Republicans that want to spend more money too, right? With Republicans that don't understand our job is to protect the freedoms of the individual. So they created the Freedom Caucus to join together to have numbers to say, hey, we are going to stand strong on these principles and we're going to hold everyone accountable, Republican or Democrat. So they started that in Washington, D.C. about a decade ago. 3 years ago, several people realized, hey, Washington, D.C. is a problem, but we have 50 mini swamps at every state capital across the country where they're doing the same thing. Last year was the largest budget in Oklahoma state history. Who has control of every branch of government right now? Republicans. We've had control for 15 years. And during that 15-year time, we have more than doubled the state budget. Now, you can make the argument, well, yeah, Democrats neglected roads and bridges, so we had to put some money into roads and bridges and some of that stuff. There are a few cases where you can make the argument, okay, that's a function of state government, we had to put some money there. But if you look at the vast majority, no, it's just a lot of elected officials that think that they are entitled to spend your money, to dole out your money because they feel like they can spend your money better than you can for all their little pet peeve projects. That's what it's been. And so the U.S. Freedom Caucus realized that this is a problem at the state level. So 3 years ago, they said, we're going to go into the states and start creating state freedom caucuses. So they launched in Georgia. Georgia was the first state. They're now up to 13 states where they have a freedom caucus. Oklahoma was number 12. We launched last fall. And so what it is it's the most conservative members of the House and the Senate. I mentioned Senator Shane Jett. He is the chairman of the Freedom Caucus. We have a vice chair in each chamber. On the Senate side, it's Senator Dusty Devers. On the House side, it's Representative Jim Olson. Those are the only members that we publicly acknowledge. The reason for that is because when you take a strong stance, sometimes leadership wants to punish you. And so other members can freely say, yes, I am a member of a Freedom Caucus, but it's their decision to do that, okay? So those are the only three that we publicly acknowledge. We don't talk about what our numbers are. We like to keep them guessing, but our numbers are constantly growing. And so we have been holding the line on spending, and we are holding the line on an income tax. We are demanding that we get an income tax this year, a path to zero, just like Governor Stitt has been asking for as well. So the Freedom Caucus is working on those things. And my new job, my new role is I am the executive director for the Freedom Caucus, or state director, whatever you want to call me. So I work for the national organization. I'm their boots on the ground here in Oklahoma, helping Senator Jett and Senator Devers and Representative Olson in any way they need help, looking at bills and saying, hey, here's a bad provision in this bill, helping with debate prep, like, hey, here's something you might want to consider talking about. Whatever I can do to help, I'm basically their chief of staff, helping them in any way I can. So part of my role is to come out and talk to organizations about how you all can get engaged and involved and informed. So one thing I want to tell you is there is an app. I know you guys have talked about the app for Washington, D.C. There is a state level app. It's called Okla 60th, OKLA 60TH. And when you open it up, it's done by the electric co-ops. They create this. You can look at it and you can find your statewide elected officials. It has your federal, but it has the Senate and the House. If you click on like Senate, you can look at by a committee. You can say, okay, I know there's a bill in public safety. I want to look at it. It'll have the list of all the people that are on that committee. If you click on any one of them, you guys probably know of Warren Hamilton. You probably heard that name. I click on that. It gives his district number, the counties that he covers, shows a map of it. It has his email address, his phone number, all the committees that he serves on. And this is very important. It has the name and email address for his executive assistant. Everyone at the Capitol has someone that runs their office, either on the House or the Senate side. Those are the ones that you are most likely going to be dealing with. I mean, if you have someone's, a senator or representative's cell phone, by all means contact them directly. But most likely you're going to be talking to these people. And these are just people trying to do their jobs. Yes, ma'am.
What was that app again?
It's called Okla 60th, OKLA, and then space 60TH.
Very good. Could we give Nathan a hand? We really appreciate it.
I'll stick around. I know a couple of you had more questions. I'll stick around after.